Good evening. In Efir, the news from the television company Ostankino. And now the main events at this hour. The Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, has begun his work visit to Oryol, calling the exaggerated gossip around the reformed government hysterical idle talk. 12 populated points in the southwest of Azerbaijan have been liberated by the National Army. Because of record snowfall, a state of emergency is developing in Kamchatka. In Colombia, terrorists opened fire on the participants of a peaceful demonstration, killing 32 people. The political crisis in Japan has evoked panic on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. In Moscow, the Museum of Private Collections has opened in the museum building of the visual arts of Pushkin. In the Kremlin today, a meeting was held of the President, Boris Yeltsin, with the Prime Minister, Viktor Chernomyrdin. The aim of the meeting, as the head of the government said to Interfax, were the final touches to be added to the budget for the first quarter of 1994. Viktor Chernomyrdin noted that the last corrections were added to the budget, and after presenting it to the President, the budget is completely viable. Also, today, the Prime Minister began his two-day work visit to Oryol, where tomorrow a meeting will be held of representatives of the 18 regions of Central Russia on problems of the agrarian industrial sector and supplying country with food. Before his flight departed, Viktor Chernomyrdin answered the questions of our correspondent. How do you react to the fact that practically all sources of mass media predict failure for the government you have just reconstructed? I'm, of course, quite surprised by this. It must be in our blood, probably, that we haven't yet begun. You haven't yet been born, and already you've been buried. The program, which was adopted on the 6th of August, was adopted by government under the leadership of the President. It was ratified and adopted at the meeting of the Soviet ministers with the participation of all heads of the regions. And the coming in September of Gaidar absolutely has brought no amendments or changes. He adopted it. He was in agreement with it. Russia's choice, which emerged in the pre-election campaign, specifically followed a program of government. So therefore, what is the issue? Who and what is to be disputed? He hasn't taken anything away with him. We worked heart to heart with him, I can say directly, and he can also say that. So therefore, where is the panic? What has happened? Suddenly everyone has arisen. We didn't recede and we won't recede. There were no indulgences and there will not be. We're beginning a new year and preparing for the next meeting of the Soviet ministers with the participation of all the leaders of the regions. This is extremely serious, and the address of the President is being prepared, which is also for the first time, and we're preparing the economic portion of the meeting and all the other directions. Therefore, here I don't see what the issue is. In this connection, do you think that contradictions will develop between you and the President, or as previously, do you fully share each other's positions and programs? We've never had any contradiction, nor do we have, and I think we never will have. The principal approaches in all matters are agreed upon between us. We discuss them, we consult each other, we define them. Yes, this has been and will be, and I think it will be while we continue to work. Viktor Stepanovich, all these years, which programs, apart from the monetary programs, do you intend to implement? First of all, I would like to say that we absolutely never worked without considering the relations between the government and professional unions and producers regarding establishing prices on products and for a certain period to establish certain salary levels. This is extremely important, and this is a non-monetary approach. And there are many other methods today which must contribute toward the improvement of our work. The detailed interview of the Prime Minister of Russia will be shown immediately after our program. And now, a report from Oryol. Today, in the afternoon, in Oryol, the chairman of the Russian Federation, Viktor Chernomyrdin, arrived. Viktor Chernomyrdin is accompanied by the deputy chairman of the government of Russia, Alexander Zaviruka, the chairman of the central bank, Viktor Gerashenko, the mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lov, and other leaders visited today one of the suburban plants which specializes in raising large-type horned livestock, and became acquainted with the work of the Narishinsk food processing plant and an agrarian industrial complex plant in several regions of the Orlovsk district. The president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, signed a decree today to announce the appointment of Alexander Maximovich Yakovlev as the authorized representative of the president in the Federal Assembly. This was announced by the press service of the president of Russia. The waves caused in Russia and world opinion, caused by the reforming of the cabinet of Viktor Chernomyrdin, although dying down, nonetheless obviously survived to this week. The main culprit of the disrupting of the fragile calm in government, Yegor Gaidar, who did not become in his second term in government the locomotive of reform, did not wish to remain simply as its symbol and turned to affairs of the State Duma. Another active reformer, the Minister of Finances, Boris Fedorov, despite many statements to the contrary lately, in fact, will remain in his post. Today, Viktor Chernomyrdin stated to the press that he did not accept the resignation of Fedorov, and to finally decide who will be the main financier of the country is the responsibility of the president, Boris Yeltsin. And now, when the personal structure of the government is mostly known among politicians, political scientists and journalists, the correction of the course of reform finds increasingly more understanding. For example, in the Federative Council, many of its members welcomed the fact today that revolutionary romanticism and monetarism must yield to the process of government regularization during the transition to the market. And also, the basic criteria in assessing the work of the new government will be its ability to influence the decrease of the tempos of inflation, the policy of financial stabilization, and the ability to return debts to the agrarian, military, and budget sectors. In this, the government must avoid temptation to launch a money-printing press into full speed. And one more conclusion from recent parliamentary elections one must consider. Millions of Russians did not vote against reform or democracy. They voted against weak government, against their own economic, social, and legal defenselessness. Russians expressed themselves for a strong, free nation. Without a strong government, it cannot be so. Today, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, sent the residents of St. Petersburg, the veterans of the battle for Leningrad, to the Leningrad blockade survivors, a greeting on the 50-year anniversary of the deliverance of Leningrad from the fascist blockade. Today, Chizhov informed that Boris Yeltsin plans to visit St. Petersburg on the 27th and 28th of January. He'll participate in events dedicated to the 50th anniversary of the deliverance of Leningrad from the fascist blockade. In Efir, the news. In Tajikistan, in the area of the border Kishlak-Yankun, in the mountainous Badakhshan, on the evening of the 23rd of January, an armed clash took place of the local units of defense with a group of Afghan mujahids, numbering around 15 people, who infiltrated from the territory of neighboring Afghanistan. Suffering several casualties and injuries, the mujahids retreated. During the battles, local residents reclaimed from the Afghan forces 2 hostages who were fellow villagers. Picturesque in the spring, the mountains of Bastizhum, but in the winter, covered with snow. Given the tragic events occurred here, they inspire alarm. Today, the severe corner of the mountains of Pamir is the new location of the well-known 12th Regiment of the Moscow Border Troops Division. The former remains only as a rubble, reminding one of the tragic events which occurred here in July of last year, when, as a result of the barbarous attack of gunmen of the Tajik opposition, 25 young Russian border troops died. Still, as previously, the situation remains complex in this location of the Tajik-Afghan border, as it is along the entire 1,200-kilometer length. Almost daily, from the adjacent territory, border troops and divisions are subjected to fire. Literally 1 hour ago, on the side from the mountain Turk, it was shot at from automatic weapons from the Afghan side. The border post was therefore forced to reciprocate with response fire. During the entire last year, 80 times on the border, military activities were recorded. 150 times the border posts were subject to fire from neighboring sides. Almost 500 violators were detained who possessed firearms from special camps of Afghanistan. And in the new year, it is a rare day when it passes without declaring emergency. The border post is standing, and the border post will continue to stand. This is the duty to the memory of those who fell here. And this is a duty because of the fate of Tajikistan and partially Russia. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, Alexander Chikvaidze, arrived in Moscow. The aim of the visit, as the head of the Georgia, Edvard Shevardnadze, stated today in the traditional radio interview, is to coordinate positions of Georgia and Russia on the Russian plan of regularization of the conflict in Abkhazia. They will also clarify organizational issues for the planned visit on the 3rd and 4th of February to Georgia of the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. Headed by a person trusted by Zviad the Professor Guran Sharad, the delegation, which included representatives of law enforcing organs of Georgia and several relatives and supporters of the ex-president, returned from Grozny without receiving consent of the family to conduct expertise essential to clarify the circumstances on the death of Gumsakhurdi. The independent international experts from Russia, Germany and Great Britain, who arrived in Tbilisi to participate in the judicial medical investigation of the body of the ex-president, were forced to leave Georgia empty-handed, however promising to return as soon as the site of the grave was disclosed to them. And today, another sensational attempt was made to hold a meeting on Rustaveli Prospect. The supporters of Zviad Gumsakhurdi, the majority of whom were women, staged a sit-in on the steps of the Parliamentary of Georgia building with photographs of the ex-president in their hands and announced a hunger strike demanding from the government to immediately satisfy all the demands made by the family of Zviad Gumsakhurdi. The police who were present on guard dispersed the crowd. The most active participants were detained. The concrete dates for the possible meeting in Moscow, with the mediation of Russia, the presidents of Azerbaijan and Armenia, Gedal Varlev and Levon Tarpetrosyan, have not yet been defined. About this, Interfax stated today through the special representative of the Russian Federation, the head of the Russian peacekeeping mission on the regularization of the Karabakh conflict, Vladimir Kazimierov. Meanwhile, in the zone of military activity, events are developing along their own path of logic. Not to lose any momentum which was gained previously, the Armenian forces today again attacked posts of the National Army along the entire front. However, having suffered great losses in live forces and technology, they retreated. In the high mountainous Kivazharsk region, despite the snow and the frost, the Azerbaijani units freed 19 populated points and today control one of the strategically significant areas of the automobile routes in the To-Baydar-Lokshim and also the highway Ribaijar-Adala. And as military sources report, severe clashes continue in the area of the railway station Garadiz, whose aim is to impede the transit of spare parts through the territory of Iran, food and medications blockaded in the ethnic Chulansk Republic. According to the Ministry of Defense of Azerbaijan, during the last days, the number of soldiers from the enemy side who voluntarily are deserting from combat positions has increased. Again, battles rage in Karabakh. Blood is flowing. People are perishing. For yesterday alone, the Azerbaijani army could not account for 33 of its soldiers and officers. From the Karabakh side, 2 died, 6 were injured. The ratio of losses shows best who is the aggressor in Karabakh and who is in a defense position. Together with the recent incessant attacks along the entire front, the Azerbaijani forces during the last few days has actively been deploying military aviation. 2 airplanes, AVVS, of the enemy again attempted to bomb Stepanakert. In the foothills of the capital of the NKR, through the means of anti-aviation defense of Karabakh, one of these war machines was shot down. The search for the pilot who catapulted himself continue. On the brink of a state of emergency is the city Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. Because of strong cyclones which descended on the southern part of Kamchatka in the first half of January, practically from the 5th of January on the south of the peninsula, snowstorms have not ceased. For one day alone, when in Petropavlovsk, the velocity of the winds grew to 30 meters per second, and in the Lopatka area up to 40 meters per second. On the city, approximately 1 month of normal precipitation was dumped. Today in Petropavlovsk, the situation has developed when functioning relatively normally is only the main automobile route. Emergency services have in their use only 2 outdated all-weather vehicles and even less powerful, equally obsolete other vehicles. And how, in this situation, can one reach homes in response to first aid calls to supply normal vehicular movement, which is called mobilized, is the entire personal fleet of cars of the city and district? The situation, day by day, grows more complicated. It acquires a more threatening emergency nature. Relatively ineffective is the assistance from the military garrison. Almost every day on this theme, discussions rage in the city and district administration. Already more than once the question was posed to declare a state of emergency in Petropavlovsk. Today, Alexander Shokhin gave his first press conference in his new capacity as the Minister of Economics of Russia. To all those present, a short biography was issued of Alexander Nikolaevich. There it is indicated that the roots of the minister are in peasant stock, although his father was a laborer, his mother a teacher. But however, the discussion was not so much about the Minister of Economics as the economy of Russia itself, which is enduring difficult days. The predictions are also not optimistic. Inflation, according to Shokhin, will exceed December's figures of last year, and this will be mostly a result of the decisions of October and November. New transport tariffs, fuel prices, liquidation of debts have increased budget expenditures, and as a result, inflation will increase as a minimum of 20%. The main goal of the economic policy, according to the Prime Minister, is to combine macroeconomics, more simply, to see the trees beyond the forest, that is, separate industries. And separate industries who, for example, don't like very much to pay taxes and avoid them by any means. Taxes will be collected strictly, said Shokhin, and maybe even by administrative methods. These methods, of course, are non-monetary, he stated. However, the treasury will be increased. One more problem is loans and discounts. Some companies, says Alexander Shokhin, them not, but for designated purposes. In state farms, these funds are being used rather to buy feed to pay salaries, said the minister, demonstrating his peasant roots. Over loans, strict control is necessary, but the main problem is the crisis of non-payments. There are no final decisions in this case, but in any case, the most ideal economic program doesn't guarantee the improvement of the economic situation by spring. The tense situation in the economy of the capital forced the mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lov, to cancel his vacation. As HRTASS reported, the reasons for economic problems are the fact that the government of Russia owes various capital organizations and companies for last year alone 250 billion rubles. Before flying to Orel for a meeting of the heads of administrations, Yuri Lov stated that en route he intends to discuss this problem with Viktor Chernomyrdin. In the reverse scenario, a threat will be posed to the supply of Muscovites with the necessary products, goods and services. At today's trade in the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange, the rate of the ruble in relation to the dollar did not change as compared to the end of last week. 1,544 rubles for 1 American dollar. The English call Birmingham the town of 1,001 industries, and maybe this is why they maintain it in impeccable cleanliness. Ecology is not just a word for them, associated with a certain campaign for the salvation of the environment. It is rarely pronounced, but so as to avoid unpleasant consequences, demands are most stringent, in technology especially. This was taken into account by the Saratov aviation constructors, the builders of Yakovlevla Bureau, the specialists of the Central Aerodynamic Institute, who were invited to England to present for judgment of possible future purposes their own production. As it became evident, Western market for these machines is not such a hopeless dream. According to the interest which was demonstrated by local authorities, the representatives of business and financial circles, to the new generation of Yakovs, which are being produced in the city on the Volga. In takeoff and landing, the 120-seat machine, equipped with modern navigational and pilot equipment, can do so in practically any weather. The level of comfort is at international standards. In the near future plans of the factory is the production of a new 8-seater passenger business airplane, which does not concede in quality to the English competitor produced by British Aerospace, a company which is also participating in the production of such broadly known aerobuses. Unlike our experience of recent years, this is a bright example of cooperation of leading Western countries. A sensation was the news that in Saratov, assembly is underway of a real flying saucer, a principally new flying apparatus which simultaneously combines the wing and the fuselage does not need airports. It lands softly with the aid of air pillows, either on land or on sea. It can carry a cargo weight of up to half of its own weight, which is unprecedented in the history of aviation. Unfortunately, this unique apparatus, without world analogies, which any airport would willingly take, would remain unrecognized as a flying object in our domestic skies. Today at 6:12 Moscow time, the spaceship Soyuz TM-18 departed from the station Mir and reconnected itself to another joint connection. This was pursuant to the flight program, but there was one more unplanned task. Afanasyev, Chizhov and Polyakov examined and photographed the station and carefully checked the connecting system course. Have a look. On the left of the screen, the contour of the ship. Now it is in an abstract course and it will begin to turn and then again automatically will aim itself at the station. Everything is in working order. Departing the ship contact, Tsiblev and Serebrov did not damage anything. After this, the spaceship, after 1 hour and 45 minutes, reconnected itself to the station Mir. Everything is in perfect working order. According to the Minister of Internal Affairs of Russia, 70% of alcoholic beverages which were taken for testing from various trade establishments do not correspond to the necessary sanitary norms. That means that every person who uses alcohol is subjecting his own health to risk, and often lethal risk. In Russia, annually, from the use of pseudo-alcohol, 40 to 50,000 people depart for the other world. But on those who experience no shame making this alcohol, there is a special report. The Nizhegorod militia, in detaining this criminal group, acts in a very firm manner. Those who are being handcuffed currently call themselves businessmen. We'll call them simply poisoners. However, this business is not just for drinkers or alcoholics. If we drink a shot glass today, we don't know if we'll live until Monday. The production of the most dangerous alcohol surrogates in Russia has become a usual, profitable and pervasive matter. Here in Nizhny, a full cycle was found, from the manufacture of the equipment to the purchase of components to the realization of false beverages. These products are offering not only Russian but imported alcohols. And this is Smolensk, a usual alcohol factory. You'd never know it was an underground one. A conveyor and a diligent worker with the enthusiasm of our times, producing surrogates under the enticing name Lemon. And in Astrakhan, the militia has stopped a train from the southern republics. And what are some of our guests bringing in? What do you have in your knapsacks? It's the same picture. All of this will help them to make money. The vodka is false, but the money is real. And how about our health? The toxicological center of the Institute Lifosovsky says that it treats daily victims of alcohol poisoning from surrogates. The head of the toxicological center of Moscow, Yuri Lov, says that according to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, mass poisoning is fatal in the regions of Tuvis, Chuvask, Saratovsk and other republics and districts of Russia. We don't have special preventative documents. The law is ineffective on certification of goods and services, and also the decree of the president to establish a government monopoly on the production and the supply of alcohol products is not effective. Until measures are made harsher against these poisoners, the government will continue to lose hundreds of billions of rubles and citizens to lose their health and lives. Can one, by the external appearance of the bottle, recognize that the vodka is homemade? The homemade alcohol is usually labeled by hand, and a classic example is one here of homemade labeling and another homemade label. Along the entire label, glue has been smeared in an uneven layer, and another label has clearly been applied in violation of the technology of labeling. If the cap is not sealed tightly and can be manipulated, you should immediately be suspicious regarding the authenticity of the given beverage. We recommend to buy spirits only in government establishments. In the southeast of Colombia, gunmen surrounded the location of a rally of one of the parties and opened fire on unarmed people. As a result, 32 people died, 11 were injured. According to witnesses, people were scurrying in a panic under the bullets and could not escape the blockade. Authorities have laid the blame for the crime on the partisan group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. The president of the country, Cesar Gaviria, declared in certain areas of Colombia a state of emergency. Among the Royal Defense Forces of Lesotho, confrontations are underway. Almost 600 soldiers soldiers and officers attacked the relatively small capital garrison. The clash began after the opposition provoked supporters of the army to demand from the government a 100% increase in salary. The Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, greeted today the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Alma Mossou, who arrived in Jerusalem with a short work visit. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt called insignificant the differences between Israel and the PLO on the accord on the introduction of self-rule of Palestine on some of the occupied territories. Two basic today's events in Yugoslavia giving hope on the possibility of a better future. That is the first session of the new Serbian parliament and the launching into circulation of a new convertible dinaro. 250 national electives victorious at the 12th of December elections began the task of reforming the Serbian government. The third multi-partied parliament of the Republic, the Skupština of National Unity, will probably formally terminate the three-year rule of the socialist government in the largest Yugoslavian republic. Because the Socialist Party did not gain at the December elections the overwhelming majority in the Skupština, in the new parliament, apart from the socialists informing the government, the oppositional parties will probably participate. And being particularly destroyed by the blockade and inflation, the currency, dinaro, will be replaced by a convertible currency equal in value to the German mark. The Yugoslavs, who were accustomed to millions and billions, as of today will receive banknotes in banks of 1, 5, and 10 gold convertible dinar face values. Although by noon today, not in a single bank was this currency available. It is difficult to predict the lifespan of the experiment of Professor Dragoslav Aronovich in the country severed from the entire world by a blockade. The majority of the population in Yugoslavia is beneath poverty level and can only hope for an economic miracle. As of today, together with the new parliament, in the country, two parallel monetary systems will exist, the old and new dinars, with a relation of 13 million to 1. The author of the new economic program, Professor Avramovich, will probably become the chairman of the National Bank of Yugoslavia. Today, the Department of Haukan, the station responsible for storage and study of the archives of the state, presented to the society new documents regarding Herbert Wenner. Wenner, who died in 1990, belongs to the legendary Social Democratic trio. Together with Will Brandt and Helmut Schmidt, he defined the policy of the party in the post-war years. And now it becomes clear that Wenner, a former communist who at the end of the 1930s was in the Stalin's Moscow, gave the NKVD detailed information on his friends. The widow of Willy Brandt, Bridget, she is 33 years younger than her deceased husband, now suddenly exposed notes of the patriarch of social democracy. Brandt blames Wenner for losing his post as chancellor and accuses him of secret contacts with the German Democratic Republic. On the other hand, it is reported that with the help of the money from the Stasi and the KGB, Wenner and his cohort, the former deputy of the Bundestag, Karl Wimund, whom, against the last prosecutor, is preparing accusations of espionage, bought votes of the peasant politicians before the decisive vote in the East Accords. In other words, they essentially were saving Brandt's neck. Bridget affirms that information that Wimund was a Stasi agent Brandt was given by a current resident of the Federal Republic of Germany, the former ambassador of the USSR in Bonn, Valentin Falin. That one, the latter, categorically refutes the fact. The widow of Brandt was proposed to even exclude from the SDPG, but the current chairman of the party of the Sharping prudently refused to accomplish this. In October, the social elections will hold place, and the Social Democrats ahead probably, and all of these scandals will be to the benefit of the opposition. Panic happened in Tokyo on the stock exchange after the parliament passed the package of political reforms on reform. On the exchange, the rate of shares of leading Japanese companies, the so-called Nikkei index, fell by more than 950 points. Usually, when one prepares for a report, one has to read books or research figures. But currently, this was impossible because in Moscow today, on the Volkonka Street, the Museum of Private Collections was the only of its type. Such a museum does not exist anywhere in the world. The idea of its creation belongs to the famous scientist, the Moscow collectioner Lev Zibirstein, and the director of the Museum of Visual Arts, Irina Alexandrovna Antonova. In celebrations of the opening, Naina Yosifovna Yeltsina took place. It took only 5 years in our difficult times to brilliantly reconstruct one of the buildings of the city estate Golitsyn on Volkhonka. At the opening, Irina Alexandrovna noted that this museum was built on government funds, and today this represents presenting the museum to the government of Russia, the government of Moscow. The exhibit is a collection of Sergei Mikhail Tretьяков, is for the first time fully revealed to the audience, and first place is taken by the exposition of Eisenstein, more than 2,000 works. Excellent paintings, this is Repin, and unique graphic collections. These are portraits of the Decembrists, painted by Nikolai Vestushev. They were found and publicized by Zebrinstein. The life of Mikhail Zebrinstein was always a celebration which passed in untiring labor, because as a person who was involved in this area, he invested unusual passion into everything that he did, and that includes his collection. He felt that art must belong to the people. To the greatest regret, we cannot name all the treasured names in our report. There were 25 auditoriums, 2,000 meters of exhibition area. A great debt has been paid, a great matter accomplished. This is probably a matter of life. Here will come those who are possessed with one of the most remarkable human passions, that is the passion of collecting, that is, love of art. With this report, I will complete my overview of the main events of the day, and in 1 minute you will see, as usual, the news of sport. Good evening. Good evening. Good news from Holland. The Russian Valery Salov is first of the 12 contenders for the World Chess Crown in the FIDE version, entered the next level of competitions. He won a match against Alexander Halifman with the score 5-1 early. Salov was successful in 6 matches of the 8 that were planned. Kaliningrad resident Alexander Volkov, 12th position, gave way in the Open Championships of Australia to Thomas Muster from Austria from 3 rounds. Volkov was the last Russian tennis player who was competing on the Green Continent's courts. In the quarterfinals now are Pete Sampras, Jim Courier, Goran Ivanisevic, Mel Washington, Todd Martin, and Magnus Gustafsson. In the National Championships of Portugal, the leader is the Lisbon Benfica. In the tournament, it beat Bonavisto 3-1. 2 balls were scored by Panero and Pinto. In both combinations, immediately assisting were our legionnaires Kulkov and Yuran. After the victory, Benfica was 28 points ahead of Sporting by 3 points. Today in the championships of the International Hockey League, there were 5 matches played. Spartak Salavat Yulaev 2-0, Metallurg Cherepavets, Metallurg Magnitogorsk 5-1, Torpedo Yaroslav Traktor are playing in overtime. Avangard against the Wings of the Soviets 4-1, and the Metallurg Novokuznetsk against Tilsk Sokol 4-2. And now the report of our correspondents Anatoly Melavin from Saransk and Alexander Parfirnyonko from Krasnoyarsk. The Great Prize of Russia, the first of the 5 levels of regulation racing, was opened by a series of international races on the Shipa Island. And again, the best racers of the world, the capital of Moldova, welcomed 16 racers from 10 countries. And the Coup Grand Prix of Russia were the fastest on ice, showed the last year's champion Vladimir Fadeev and Alexander Balashov, a representative of the auto plant of Likhashov. Having exchanged victories, Vladimir Fadeev and Alexander Balashov became here the Russian Grand Prix winners. This first level showed the strongest, and we feel that in the future we will continue to do likewise. I think everything will be defined in the final stage in Lillehammer, Norway. Today in Krasnoyarsk, the 5th international tournament in wrestling is underway for the prize of the 2-time Olympic Games champion, Ivan Yerigin. This man is well loved and respected in the area. He's a prominent athlete, and he is also the founder of the School of Wrestling, currently competing in many countries. On this day, Krasnoyarsk athletes are meeting in their hometown with contenders from Japan, Turkey, South Korea, China, Mongolia, Italy, Iran, and other CIS countries. The general sponsor of the tournament is the Union Goods Producers and Entrepreneurs of Russia, the LLD Association. The competitions were dedicated to the centennial of Olympic Games in Krasnoyarsk. It is a great athletic holiday.